The Democrats, the media, and the deep state are desperate to stop us. And it's not me, it's us, it's all of us. It's 63 million, but it's much more than 63 million, much more. And right now, our numbers are higher than they've ever been before. So, you know, they've never been this. But they want to stop us because they know we are here, and that's what we're doing, and that's what's taking up so much time. We're draining the swamp in Washington. Nothing terrifies Democrats more than the fact that all of their spying, they actually spied on my campaign. Can you believe it? I mean, you know, they try and say, well, we were actually just checking things out. Oh, that's wonderful. The lying, the falsifying over the past 3 years plus. Before I ever even announced they were spying, I guess they knew we were going to win, right? But over that past more than 3 years is finally being exposed. And remember this, that truth is a force of nature. Desperate to conceal their misdeeds, the Democrats are now attacking us for calling out the grave corruption of the Bidens, just like they melted down when we pointed out crooked Hillary's shocking and very many misdeeds. $33,000 emails disappeared, but she said they only had to do with her working out at her daughter's wedding. 30. She's a beauty.
First, Democrats are forging ahead with their impeachment inquiry, inviting more top White House officials to testify this week behind closed doors, just after the House vote to formalize the inquiry on Thursday. This, as recent polls show, Americans are split over whether to impeach and remove the president. Take a look at these new Fox News polls, showing 49% of people support impeachment and removal, compared to 41% who oppose it. I want to bring in now former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, the host of the new syndicated radio show and podcast, War Room Impeachment, and it is great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us, Steve. Congrats on the podcast. We'll talk about that later. But first, your reaction to what the Democrats did on Thursday, this vote to move it forward.
Well, here's what happened. You got to go back in time. The fever was broken by Matt Gaetz. You had Lee Zeldin, you had Jim Jordan, you had Mark Meadows in the hearings themselves saying every day that these weaponized tweets, these weaponized leaks that were coming out, the president had done nothing wrong. They sat through all the testimony. And then Matt Gaetz, who's, people think of him just as a populist firebrand, he's actually a brilliant strategist. He went down to the skiff to really show the American people, because people weren't paying attention, that this was a star chamber. And after that, Nancy Pelosi had to call a first audible. Remember, the reason these numbers look the way they do, she had 4 weeks, right, of unmitigated time.
That's right.
to free shots on goal, to go after the president with weapons. She's a master of political disinformation and political warfare, and that's what it was. When Gaetz went to the skiff, 4 days later, they realized they had a problem. The Washington Post ABC poll shows that 65% of the American people don't believe these things should be done in secret. They want to have transparency. And that's why she was forced to call her first audible, which was this partisan vote that took place on Thursday. Look, the whole due process, this thing's President did nothing wrong. This is all about a policy debate about American first national security policy, and it's unconstitutional, as David Rifkin laid out in that great Wall Street Journal op-ed. What the American people are now going to come to this, because they're actually going to be the jury. The Senate's going to be the instrument, but the American people are going to weigh and measure here. They're going to demand, I think, no matter what games the Democrats play about who the witnesses are, they're going to demand. And I got to tell you, I think two witnesses that have to be called are Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Joe Biden, this is about him as a constitutional officer. This is him about Vice President of the United States in Ukraine and in China. And he's going to have to answer, I think, to these panels exactly what he did about bringing American crony capitalism to already what is considered one of the most corrupt nations on earth, and the most corrupt nation, as the Guardian newspaper says, in Europe.
That's my point, though. Do you think Adam Schiff is going to say yes to bringing Hunter Biden down?
He's not.
They're not going to be able to question.
No, but the firestorm, I think the American people are, look.
Yeah, I agree with you about the American people.
65% of the American people are saying right now, we want transparency. We want to know what really went on. The president, and this is what he's been saying for 10 days, forget process, substance, substance, substance. In the granularity of this, you're going to see that this is a debate over these bureaucrats, and I'm not questioning their patriotism, but they have a certain way they think the world rolls. That was upended in the 2016 election. The American people voted for a new course, America First national security policy. Mike Pompeo said on Thursday, I think in a speech,
the Hudson Institute.
Well, he said he didn't see anything wrong that the president's done that's not totally consistent with his policies of, number one, rooting out corruption, but more importantly, making sure that NATO and the European Union are allies. It was the central part of America First. And this is why the apparatus is so against it. The president's saying we're no longer going to have protectorates. NATO's not a protectorate, they're an ally. The Gulf Emirates are not a protected ally. South China Sea, the Northwest Pacific. In the situation in Ukraine, one of the things he was doing is that the EU kind of started this, right, by forcing membership of Ukraine into the EU and actually talking about NATO membership. Where's the EU's money? If we're going to be given money for arms, where's the European Union? Where's NATO's money?
Yeah.
And by the way, for a young stand-up comedian who runs on an anti-corruption platform, the President of the United States is trying to sit there and try to make sure we don't have additional corruption. And the United States particularly hasn't brought the Biden type of corruption to the Ukraine. So if Schiff is going to sit there and argue that Joe Biden is above the law, Hunter Biden is above the law, the Bidens have to be called. Joe Biden, I tell you, Joe Biden is a hand grenade and Hunter Biden's the pin. And when that pin gets pulled, the shrapnel is going to blow back all over the Democratic establishment.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she expects public impeachment hearings to begin this month. Democrats are inviting more top White House officials to testify behind closed doors in the coming days. And top Republicans, again, are slamming what they call a sham process after the House voted to formalize impeachment proceedings. Joining me right now is Congressman Jim Jordan. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee and is a ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you, Brenda.
Does this mean you're shut out? You're shut out of all of this?
Well, the closed-door depositions I'll still be able to be a part of, but then when they go to the open hearings, it's just the Intelligence Committee. Adam Schiff gets 45 minutes under the resolution that passed on Thursday to ask questions. The rest of the members get 5 minutes. Adam Schiff gets to call the witnesses he wants, but Republicans have to first submit a list to Adam Schiff to get his approval for any witnesses we or the White House might want. So you can try to put a ribbon on a sham process, but that doesn't make it any less of a sham. It doesn't make it any less unfair and any less partisan.
Do you think people understand this, Congressman? I mean, where is this going? Tell us what you've learned so far with the testimonies that you have been exposed to.
Well, we can't get into the substantive matter, but we know this. We're less than 12 months before the next election, and in Pelosi and Schiff's unfair and partisan process, they're trying to impeach the President of the United States, again, a year from the election, based on an anonymous whistleblower with no first-hand knowledge, who has a bias against the President, who, it's been reported, worked with Joe Biden. And oh, by the way, Maria, who's the only member of Congress who knows who this individual is, who started this whole thing? 435 members of Congress, only one knows who the whistleblower is, Adam Schiff. How is that fair? None of the rest of us get to know. More importantly, you and the press don't get to know. Most importantly, The American people don't get to know. We'd like to evaluate this guy's credibility, find out who he or she may have talked to form the basis of the complaint they filed with the Inspector General. So this is just as unfair and partisan as it gets. They're making the rules up as they go along, and then those rules that they make up, they don't even follow them.
Well, there's a lot of speculation about who it is. We are not naming the person based on the speculative
I'm not either.
Reports
I don't
that
know.
we see. Exactly. But we understand that perhaps he may have been working with John Brennan during the 2016 election and perhaps putting the breadcrumbs around that there was collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians. Do we know that? And what is going to happen with John Brennan as we await for this IG report and the John Durham now criminal investigation?
A couple things. Again, it's been reported. I don't know if that's accurate or not. What I do know is this. 6 weeks ago, Adam Schiff said, we need to hear from the whistleblower. We need to have him come testify. That would be good because we can evaluate his credibility. Schiff has since changed. Now he says we don't need to hear from the whistleblower. So what event happened in that time frame that changed the chairman's mind? Only one thing. We learned that Adam Schiff's staff had met with the whistleblower, and Adam Schiff didn't tell us. We also learned that the whistleblower didn't communicate that, even though the form you're required to fill out to the Inspector General, the whistleblower didn't communicate that he had talked with people on Capitol Hill, namely Adam Schiff's staff. So that's the only thing that's changed, and so now Adam Schiff has changed his tune. I think that's interesting as we move forward. Again, I think the American people have a right to know who the individual is who started this whole thing. 63 million people voted for Donald Trump in 2016. They have a right to know what this is all based on and what the Democrats are doing.
So we don't have a timetable yet for what the public hearings might look like. Is this going to go all the way into 2020? And when are we going to know what took place in the 2016 election with regard to the origins of the Russia probe, Congressman? You've been working and doing a great job on this and trying to educate the American people as far as what went on. But we are waiting to see some accountability here. What can we expect?
Well, a couple of things. I said this the other day. Thursday's vote, I think, in one way it was good that every single Republican voted against this new sham process that the Democrats are putting forward. But it really was a sad day because you think about what the Democrats have put the country through over the last 3.5, 4 years. It all started in July of 2016, as you pointed out, with this Trump-Russia investigation.
Or
where
earlier
the
than
FBI
that.
spied on,
Earlier than that.
Yeah, where they spied on 2 American citizens associated with the presidential campaign. My guess is that's probably not happened in American history. And then all the things that unfolded with Mr. Comey, the FBI, and everything that's going on there that Mr. Barr and Mr. Durham are looking into. And then we had this vote on Thursday where they formally launched this impeachment process in the sham way that they're doing it. It was really a sad day. What the Democrats have subjected the nation to in the last 3.5, 4 years. So I hope Mr. Durham's report comes and investigation gets done as quickly as possible. But I have confidence in Mr. Barr. I think he is doing the job that we expect from the United States Attorney General, and he has tasked Mr. Durham to get to the bottom of how it all started back in 2016.
Well, knowing what we know in terms of the texts, the conversation between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok and the way they dumped $10,000 in George Papadopoulos' lab, all the entrapment. I said during the Mueller report, if Robert Mueller doesn't focus on the origins of the Russia probe, it's not credible because, I mean, the Democrats refuse to focus on any wrongdoing that may have occurred during the 2016 election.
Yeah, but Bill Barr hasn't. Remember what he said 6 months ago, Maria. When he testified in front of the Senate Finance Committee, the Attorney General said 4 very important things. First of all, he said there was a failure of leadership at the upper echelon of the FBI.
Yes.
That is certainly true. Mr. Comey, McCabe, Baker, Strzok, Page, this is certainly true. Second, he said spying took place. Third, he said there's a basis for my concern about the spying that happened. And fourth, and probably most troubling, he used the term political surveillance. That's why he's tasked Mr. Durham to get to the bottom of how this all started. When you use the term political surveillance and you realize they spied on 2 American citizens,
Unbelievable.
Mr. Papadopoulos and Mr. Page, that's scary.
Congressman, great to see you this morning. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
I've spoken spoken a lot on this program about the government surveillance, unlawful surveillance of two people associated with the Trump campaign, George Papadopoulos and Carter Page. We want to now zero in on the first person surveilled in all of this, and that was former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn. Here with me right now is Lee Smith, a journalist and author of the newly released book, The Plot Against the President, along with Cindy Powell. She is the attorney for General Michael Flynn. She is also the author of the License to Lie book. It is now in its second edition. Thank you so much to you both for joining me today. And Cindy, let me kick it off with you. When do you believe General Flynn was first surveilled? Tell us how this all began.
I think it began, frankly, Maria, before he left the Defense Intelligence Agency working for President Obama, or if not before, shortly thereafter. They tasked Stephen Halper against him, among other things, and there were just innumerable instances where I think they actually put him in contact with people from Russia and then used those contacts to smear him.
So you believe it was entrapment?
Completely. It was worse than entrapment. It was a targeting operation and a complete setup. And then when the FBI went to interview him, it was on a complete pretext that they did so.
Yeah, I mean, we have a timeline here that shows that in August 7th, 2014, he retires from the Army after 33 years. Then in August of 15, he first meets Donald Trump. And then just a month later, you've got Stephen Halper, who you just referenced, awarded an Office of Net Assessments contract valued at $245,000. He was paid that much money to study Russia and China. Lee Smith, tell us about that.
Yeah, Maria, thanks very much for mentioning Halper, because I believe that he's actually the center of the Russiagate operation, and we first see him start to appear as he is targeting General Flynn. And now we understand, as Ms. Powell's work on behalf of General Flynn has shown, why the deep state, why they needed to target General Flynn, because he understood the kinds of programs that they were using and how they were misspending their money, and Halper is representative.
Well, he was paid $244,000 to write a study on China and Russia.
Right.
Is that the kind of money that one gets paid for something like that?
I mentioned this a bit in my book, and as it turns out, Mr. Halper's his research is subpar, and no, this appears to have been money that was allocated for other purposes.
Okay, hold on. We're going to take a short break. With Lee Smith and Cindy Powell, I want to show you this graphic that we put together about Stephen Halper. He was supposed to be studying China and Russia. He never went to China, he never went to Russia. However, he kept showing up at all these conferences where Trump campaign officials were at. He, as you can see, met Michael Flynn in 2017, and he saw Svetlana Lokovo, and then he saw Carter Page and Papadopoulos. He made how much? About $1 million over a year to do these studies, Lee Smith.
Yes, and of course what we see is these are not actual studies. We hear that he was reportedly the FBI's confidential human source sent against the Trump campaign. What he really is, his history as a political operative. This was a political operation designed to assist the Clinton campaign. We talk a lot about the FBI and DOJ, and we're right to focus on the very bad, likely criminal things they did, but it's important to remember that the primary beneficiary was the Clinton campaign.
Cindy Powell, what can you say about that? This guy was made more than $1 million over 1 year's period to write these studies, and yet he was running into all the Trump campaign people.
Oh, yes. He was clearly a CIA, FBI operative run through the Office of Net Assessment in the Pentagon by Colonel James Baker, who was his handler there, and paid the exorbitant amount of money to do what he was doing essentially under the table. And then the FBI used that as part of the pretext to interview him and set up the entire false narrative, framed General Flynn, altered the 302s after February 10th to make statements sound wrong when they were not. General Flynn didn't even say those things.
And this is why you're going to be doing another...
notes of the agents.
You're making another filing public tomorrow, correct? You want all these charges dropped against General Michael Flynn?
Yes, right now, technically, we're asking for the additional exculpatory evidence the government's been hiding for several years. There's a lot more evidence out there that would explain that the general was absolutely truthful with the agents to the best of his recollection at the time, and the FBI knew it. And other evidence that they knew he was serving the country, not any foreign interest.
Well, we're waiting on the John Durham investigation and the IG report. Will there be accountability? Very quickly.
I certainly believe there will be, and we see why they had to take out General Flynn, because he knew what these guys were up to, what they were hiding in these programs.
All right, we will leave it there. Lee Smith, Sidney Powell, great to have you both.
And the only cure for that Trump derangement syndrome is 4 more years.